British Prime Minister David Cameron, we're going to stay in the UK. He's in the spotlight today. Later today, he's going to make his case in Parliament for a long-awaited draft deal reshaping Britain's relationship with the EU. It's dominating the papers.
That's right, particularly the British papers. As you can imagine, that much-anticipated Brexit deal, well, let's take a look at the front page of The Independent today. It wonders, deal or no deal? And you can see there David Cameron about to make his case. Now, what's interesting is you can see that little asterisk there. The Independent asks readers to decide and actually has printed the full text of the draft agreement inside and dissected key passages. You've read what it says. This is what it means. After all, the devil is in the detail.
Exactly. Now, Cameron, of course, is insisting that he's managed to get significant concessions. That's what he's saying, isn't it? Others begging to differ.
That's right. The Independent in its editorial says the Prime Minister's settlement with the EU isn't so historic, and it certainly wasn't worth it. This editorial criticizes Cameron for panicking into making what the Independent calls a dangerous promise of an in-out referendum in June. All this to appease Eurosceptics in the Conservative Party. The merits of continued EU membership are beyond dispute. That's what the Independent says. But now is the moment of truth. We have to prove this to all people in the UK. And The Guardian, another British paper, a very pro-European paper, agrees. Enough haggling over small beans. Make the big arguments for us to stay in the EU.
Cameron also drawing some criticism from Eurosceptics, of course. They were hoping for a little bit more from him, weren't they?
That's right. The conservative tabloid, the Daily Mail, is among those who are disappointed with the Prime Minister. You can see they're talking about the great delusion. So very strong words there on the front page of the Daily Mail. In its editorial, the Mail says it admires Cameron. But on Europe, we have to say, frankly, his capacity for self-delusion is breathtaking. What happened to all those pledges, Prime Minister? And essentially the paper accuses the Prime Minister of selling the country short.
What about European papers? What are they saying?
Well, Le Soir, the Belgian paper, focuses on the fact that the EU has made some serious concessions to keep Britain in the EU, steps backwards, according to Le Soir. Libération, the French paper, has also a very interesting take on this. Says that the myth of a united EU, 28 countries advancing at the same speed, that myth is dead. And this editorial actually argues in favor of reinforcing what is united, and that is the Eurozone. So 19 countries that need to be united into a stronger Europe, a core, if you will, that needs to be protected from spoiled countries like Britain.
Different story now. Papers around the world are also focusing on the alarming spread of the mosquito-borne virus, Zika.
That's right, an explosive spread. Those are the terms used by the World Health Organization. Let's take a look at a cartoon in the China Daily today, which takes this quite literally. You can see this mosquito about to set this bomb, this ticking time bomb, which is the world off. Now, particularly, there's a lot of alarm in the U.S. over the first case that was reported in Texas. Let's take a look at the Daily Beast that says that the deepening Zika outbreak essentially has entered a too familiar phase, and that is total confusion. The more we know about Zika, the more confusing it gets. How do you get it? What does it do to you? Well, for instance, we've been talking a lot about microcephaly, these babies being born with small heads. What is that? Well, there's a very interesting piece in the Washington Post today that talks about what it's like to live with microcephaly. And to quote a woman who actually has microcephaly, she says, "It's a box of surprises. You may suffer serious problems or you may not." Symptoms exist on a spectrum, if you will. Some people suffer from very serious physical and intellectual disabilities, and others manage to live quite normally.
And finally, still a lot of focus as well on the race to the White House, of course, the aftermath of the Iowa caucuses.
That's right. It's going to be a wild ride between now and November, if anything, depending on if things follow like what happened in Iowa. Let's take a look at an article, first of all, in the New York Times, which says that the Iowa results signal a long nominating contest for both parties. No candidate is going to have an easy path. Now, on the Republican side, Ted Cruz was the surprise winner. There's a cartoon in the New York Times which wonders, could the support for Donald Trump be a mirage after all? And you can see the anger meter is starting to move a little bit more towards the center. Now, Cruz could face some tough competition from Marco Rubio, the man in the center there, the man he came in third in the Iowa caucuses. But he's seen as having a very good chance at actually winning the Republican nomination because he has the backing of the Republican establishment. And there's a cartoon in the Washington Post this time that sums that up quite well. You can see here Ted Cruz cruising forward in his bus there. And right behind him, you can see the Rubio bus. And I don't know if you can see it, but what's driving that bus is actually an elephant, the elephant, which is the symbol of the Republican Party. Now, Ted Cruz is certainly coming under a lot of scrutiny after the Iowa caucuses, and not always in a good way. Now, people tend to give female politicians a bad rap when it comes to their wardrobe. Well,
yes.
Jezebel, the feminist web blog, has given Ted Cruz the same treatment. It's a great article. Why don't Ted Cruz's clothes fit him? It might seem like a harsh judgment, but they have a series of photos which do seem to suggest that Ted Cruz tends to get clothes that are just too big for him. Baggy jeans, a baggy coat, as you can see right here. This is a man who wants to run the entire country, and he can't even manage his personal wardrobe properly. That's what Jezebel says, and says, think about it.
Poor old Ted. Thank you very much, Flo. Flo Wilmer with the papers here on France 24. Perhaps he'll sharpen up his image before those primaries next week in New Hampshire.